Selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough, written by Shri K. Natar Singh. Part 35. The next few days witnessed frantic activity in Colombo and New Delhi. A draft agreement was being prepared by Dikshit and Gamini, called a non-paper. A team which, including others, comprised KPS Menon Jr., Kuldeep Sahadev, Ronan Sen, Director Ra, and senior representatives of the Ministry of Defense met under my leadership every day to fine tune the draft agreement, which would then be approved by the Prime Minister. The only fly in the India Sri Lanka ointment was P.V. Narasimha Rao. He had reservations about the draft but was unwilling to take them up with the Prime Minister. While there was merit in Narasimha Rao's doubts, it was too late to change anything. A climate of conflict was giving way to an atmosphere of conciliation. President Jayawardene asked Gamini Dissanayake to contact Prabhakaran to inform him about the agreement, which was broadly along the lines of what he had said to N. Ram. While hope had appeared on the horizon in the Sri Lanka conflict, on the Indian side there was great confusion. Too many agencies and departments of the Government of India had their fingers in the Sri Lankan pie. The Prime Minister changed his Indian interlocutors every few months. Soon, officials in the Prime Minister's office were directly in touch with Dikshit in Colombo, but I was completely bypassed. It was a strange way to function. I later discovered that at one stage Dikshit was asked to contact Prabhakaran and persuade him to come to New Delhi. The person who eventually contacted Prabhakaran was a first secretary in the High Commission. As the final touches were being given to the text of the agreement, around 25th July, I was asked to attend one of the meetings held at 7 Racecourse Road. It seemed that while India wanted the agreement to be signed in Colombo on 26 July, Colombo felt that the date was too early. They wanted the Prime Minister to agree to move the event to 29 July. I also learned then that Prabhakaran was staying at Ashoka Hotel. He later claimed that we had kept him under house arrest. The Prime Minister had apparently met him and he was being difficult. Rajiv Gandhi asked MGR to come to Delhi to knock some sense into Prabhakaran, and MGR had succeeded. My view was that the Prime Minister should not have met Prabhakaran. Later, when I asked if the Prime Minister had got anything in writing from the LTTE chief, he got irritated and said, "He has given me his word." I said that Prabhakar's word meant nothing. He should have been asked to give his consent in writing. He would double cross us when it suited him. This Prabhakaran did more than once. It was mutually agreed that the agreement would be signed in Colombo on 29th July. I suggested to the Prime Minister that in his delegation he should include two senior cabinet ministers, preferably P.V. Narasimha Rao and N.D. Tiwari. Only P.V. Narasimha Rao came along with a large number of Tamil Nadu's MPs. We landed at Colombo airport at 10 am on 29th July 1987. The Prime Minister was informed by the minister who received him that he could not proceed to Colombo by road. The highway was blocked by several thousand Sri Lankans who were opposed to the Indo-Sri Lanka agreement. Helicopters took us to Colombo city. It resembled a ghost town. There had been violence and widespread arson. Even the property of the president had been set on fire. Rajiv, usually a crowd puller, was met with silence and unconcealed hostility. Senior members of the Sri Lankan government boycotted the arrival ceremony, as they later did the signing of the agreement at the presidential palace. This included Prime Minister Premadasa, Lalit Atulit Mudali, and Messrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike. The President's lunch too was poorly attended and the guests talked in subdued tones. The agreement was signed at 3 pm, following which the President held a reception. P.V. Narasimha Rao and I were speaking to some of the Sri Lankan politicians who had been invited to the reception when we noticed that Rajiv, President Jayawardene, and several officials were having a serious discussion. PV asked me to find out what was happening. When I asked the Prime Minister what was being discussed, his answer only added to my apprehensions. Jayawardene had told him that he feared that unless India immediately sent troops to Sri Lanka to contain the deteriorating law and order situation, a coup could take place that very night. I told the Prime Minister to take a decision on so grave a matter only after consulting his senior cabinet colleagues on his return to Delhi. To my utter surprise, he said that he had already given orders for the immediate dispatch of Indian troops by air to Colombo. PV was very disturbed when I informed him of the Prime Minister's decision, but as usual, he was unwilling to confront the Prime Minister. The reality on the ground was that India was being sucked into the Sri Lankan ethnic conflict at a scorching pace. 30th July 1987 was a dark day. As Rajiv Gandhi commenced inspecting the guard of honor, Vijita Rohanna Vijamuni, a sailor, struck Rajiv Gandhi with the butt of his rifle. While the Prime Minister's reflexes saved him from serious injury, he still received a nasty blow. The simmering discontent had found expression and was a dark indicator of the things to come. The next few months brought no respite. The IPKF arrived in August. The expectation was that we would be able to eliminate the LTTE sooner than later. The Chief of Army Staff boasted that he could take care of the LTTE and Prabhakaran in 2 weeks. It was a foolish boast. The IPKF went in without clear briefings or objectives. Neither were the troops told about the geography of the Jaffna Peninsula nor about the LTT's hideouts. As the number of casualties mounted, so did the criticism of the government in Parliament. J.N. Dikshit wrote, Rajiv Gandhi was given inaccurate advice about the political, military, and intelligence factors. He decided to go ahead with the agreement on wrong predictions, which led to hurdles which the agreement ultimately faced. The fact is that Dikshit was Rajiv Gandhi's advisor. I myself was often kept in the dark, but it was I who was asked to defend the agreement in the parliament. Verma, the Ra chief, got Rajiv Gandhi to agree that Ra would deal directly with Jayawardene without the knowledge of the Ministry of External Affairs or Ministry of Defense. However, Ra's back-channel diplomacy proved disastrous. Jayawardene sarcastically told Dikshit, how many policies does the government of India have regarding the Sri Lankan situation? There was no cohesive policy and no coordination at the operational level. The senior army officers, majors, and lieutenant generals did not get along amongst themselves. One of them had serious differences with the High Commissioner. There was no way in which Jayawardene could avoid the affairs of the IPKF and the LTTE, which were causing problems for him and the government in one form or another and at the most unexpected moments. There had always been a suspicion that a reluctant LTTE had been cajoled into accepting the Indo-Sri Lankan agreement in late July, early August 1987 through some secret deal. In April 1988, it was revealed that the Indian government had agreed to provide the LTTE with a substantial amount of money in return for their support for the agreement. An enterprising Indian journalist broke the news through the London Observer. The source of the leak was traced back to the Indian High Commission in Colombo and to Dikshit himself. The timing had a great deal to do with a new peace initiative with the LTTE in which Ra took the lead. The leak was seen as an attempt to muddy the waters. An embarrassed Indian government felt compelled to make an official statement on this in the parliament. As the Minister of State for External Affairs, I told the parliament, in order to help LTTE make the difficult transaction from military to peaceful democratic policies, it was agreed to extend some interim financial relief to LTTE on the understanding that such relief would only cover the period till the rehabilitation of its cadres. I would like to categorically refute the misleading newspaper reports that this payment was to persuade Sri Prabhakaran to accept the Indo-Sri Lankan agreement. This kind of aspersion is beyond contempt. As I have said, Prabhakaran had already accepted the agreement, but he had explained certain practical problems in respect of his cadres during the transition. The financial assistance was intended to help LTTE overcome these problems. The fact is that the LTTE had extracted a monetary payment from the Indian government before they expressed their willingness to accept the Indo Sri Lankan agreement as political reality. Eventually, only the first installment was paid, but that was because within 3 months of agreement signing the accord, the IPKF was at war with the LTTE in Jaffna. As the months rolled by, the agreement began falling apart. Jayawardene retired in late 1988. Premadasa took over and gradually dismantled Jayawardene's policies. He and Rajiv were like chalk and cheese. In 1989, Rajiv Gandhi lost the Lok Sabha elections. VP Singh succeeded him as Prime Minister. VP Singh and Premadasa of Sri Lanka agreed that the IPKF should be withdrawn from Sri Lanka. From the very beginning, the Sri Lankan ethnic issue was mishandled and ended as a complete failure. Thank you for listening.